Hello, my name is Kathleen Mills. I have an undergraduate degree in mechanical engineering, and my master's degree I obtained just a few years ago from Purdue University from the College of Ag and Biological Engineering with an emphasis in regulatory science for pharmaceuticals. My first job out of college, I worked in a nuclear reactor. The reactor was in Salem, New Jersey, and it was shut down for refueling. And there were two kinds of nuclear reactors at the time I was assigned there, a pressurized water reactor and a boiled water reactor. I worked in a pressurized water reactor, like I said, was shut down for refueling. So we had to go into the hot reactor and gather information so that we could identify equipment in the reactor and design functional instrumentation loops for reactor operators. And a lot of this had to do with some of the incidents that happened at 3 Mile Island and Peach Bottom. Reactor operators had to shut down very specific sections of a reactor to contain um, so radiation wouldn't leak. And not all the time did they know what components were involved in that. So that was pretty interesting work to do. Unfortunately, I got contaminated multiple times because a lot of the Navy nukes that I worked with knew the hot spots, and I was right out of college and kind of green behind the ears. So I was sent into a lot of the hot areas. After the second or third time they were going to request a waiver, I decided that I didn't want to stay in that field anymore. So I ended up going to Virginia and interviewing for a position as a contractor with the Department of Defense. I did get that position and was working with the Navy on P3s, but the Navy decided they wanted me direct and not as a contractor. So I ended up going with Naval Air Systems Command headquarters in Crystal City, Virginia. I started out working on small aircraft, maybe an A6, and then I ended up specializing in airframes for the Harrier, the AV-8B, and the FA-18, the Hornet. I also worked on Sidewinder AIM-9R and various engines for each of the airframes that I worked with. That work was really exciting and interesting. And it's great when you're starting out in your career to have something like that. But the travel, I loved it in the beginning, maybe once a month, but it built to be 3 weeks a month you were on the road, going to the UK, going from the East Coast to the West Coast. And it was exciting work, but then I got married. After you had a few children, it's hard to travel that much. So I stepped away from my career for a few years to raise 3 children. And I was lucky to get back into a field that took me in quality assurance. And I was working on medical devices for a medical device company in Indiana. I was very lucky. But I understood how to read standards and I knew a lot about testing, having worked for the government and using a lot of standards. So the head of the engineering team asked if I would come from quality and work on his team. Kind of like a reliability check on all of the testing that was conducted. And I worked a lot with some of the regulatory submissions for devices, not only in the US, but Japan and other countries, especially Europe. It's interesting work, and I'm one of the few people on my team that has that varied background where I went first from nuclear reactor into Defense Department and aircraft, fighter attack jets, now into medical devices. I think I'm one of the rarest people on my team having had that kind of a background. I like mechanical engineering a lot. I work with a lot of biomedical engineers, and they're wonderful, but I feel like in some instances, it's a very, very narrow field to get into. Mechanical engineering, as I said, I could go across multiple industries with my mechanical engineering degree. And when I was studying to be a mechanical engineer, I really didn't think about that far ahead, that I could cross over into these other industries. And it's been a great background for me. I've met a lot of people. Like I said, I worked for the military, so I was a civilian with the Navy. And during that time, I got to go out on a U.S. aircraft carrier, the USS Independence, when it was deployed out in the Atlantic Ocean. A lot of hands-on experience when you work for the Defense Department. Going on the carrier, part of the things they had me do was learn about tying down aircraft below deck and being out on the deck when they were shooting off the very first F-14A plus. I don't think I would have had that same experience sitting at my desk in a cubicle in Crystal City or in Patuxent River, Maryland. You really, if you have the opportunity, I think everybody should really try to get more hands-on experience if you're in engineering or any field that you apply. It's just incredible to see what the day-to-day experiences are for, in that instance, the Navy personnel. You're changing something on paper, but they're experiencing it in real life. And I think as an engineer, we don't always get that opportunity to go out there in a field and touch something and understand what it's like. Now, what I do now in the medical device industry, I'm in a test lab. So we're simulating the human anatomy and mechanically. And it's very interesting because sometimes we'll design something or we'll have a change and we'll bring in physicians so that they can actually test it in our labs in mock anatomy. So we will have simulations or we'll have a model that they can actually deploy a device in and get the resistance and feel what that's like for them in a human. And they then can give us feedback so that we can hopefully tweak our designs to make them more usable from a physician standpoint and more patient friendly. So that's one benefit right now about the current role that I have. I would say a detriment to the role I have right now is definitely I hate critiquing other people's work, and that's what I do for a living. I go back through all of their data. I go into the test with them and observe what they're doing. And then after everything's done, unfortunately, I have to tell them where they were wrong. And I don't know that I'm a great person at that, but it does take somebody who can do it clearly and articulate what exactly needs to be changed without doing it in a very negative way. So I try to be as positive I can with my fellow engineers and make sure that they know that I'm trying to help them. And in turn, we're helping the physicians and helping the patients. And that's what I do for a living.